just kind of made me not put in as much effort as I could have when I failed computer science one the first time I took it, or when I had to retake another class.
Welcome to my podcast. I'm your host, Sajad, and today we have a very important topic to talk about. So obviously right now, the tech economy is not the best. A lot of people are getting laid off. Jobs are getting rescinded, and it's just really tough to get anything right now. And actually our guest today, his name is Jae Williams. He's actually a software engineer who was recently laid off. So he's gonna talk about his journey as to what happened, what he's doing to sort of navigate the situation, as well as any tips for people who are struggling to get a job right now. He's also gonna be sharing his resume as well as additional career tips. And without further ado, let's get started right away. Hey Jae, first of all, thank you so much for joining on today's podcast. You as a qualified software engineer have a lot to share with our audience. So thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time out to speak with me today. I remember coming across your content earlier this year. I said, this dude is pretty dope. So I watched a lot more of your content, and then I decided to follow you because, again, I thought your content was pretty amazing. And again, thanks for having me today.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that. I think I started seeing some of your videos back in like May or June of this last year. And I was like, you know what, this is pretty inspiring. I saw like your content and I was like, you know what, maybe I should start my own like TikTok, Instagram page. So appreciate that. And thank you once again.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I guess let me just get right into the question. So right now we're going through a lot of economic uncertainty. There's a lot of like job offers that are getting rescinded. Companies are having layoffs. And I know you personally encountered at your company, you were laid off. So could you actually talk to us about what that experience was like, what happened, how it went down?
Yeah, so I got laid off last month after the recording of this video, and it came completely out of the blue. There was no warning, no anything like that. I was actually working on some code, about to push it up when my manager called me. And when I saw the call, of course, I've answered it because it was my manager calling me. We hop on the call and he asked me, did I see the emergency employee meeting that popped up earlier? And I saw it on my schedule, but I was heads down with some code, so I didn't actually join it. And he said, yeah, a lot of people didn't join that meeting. To cut to the chase, he said, unfortunately, this will not be a fun call. As of today, your position is terminated. And I was just like, wow, trying to take in all of the information and everything. Because again, it just came completely out of the blue, no warning or anything like that. And just like that, I was laid off.
Yeah, and the worst part about all of this is it was probably like a structural or financial decision, not really like a performance-based thing. So sometimes you're not even sure how to like navigate the situation, what you did wrong, how to improve, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny you say the financial, because the reason that was given was cost reduction. That was the reason they gave. And yeah, it was just something. And it was crazy because I've been seeing all of the videos of the layoffs and things like that. And then next thing I know, I'm a part of them.
That's tough. But yeah, I mean, I hope things get better for you. But just a little curious about like that role. What was your salary before you got laid off from that role?
Yeah, so my salary at my previous role, the base salary was $79,000. And we had various cash bonuses as well as some stock options included. So that kind of pushed up the salary range to $80,000 to $100,000. But again, the base salary was $79,000.
And I guess in terms of your plan for while you're seeking out a new job, are you trying to go for like around there, above that? What's like the game plan for you?
Yeah, so the game plan for my next job is to shoot for that six-figure mark and above, so $100,000 or more. Now that I've gotten a decent amount of experience, especially at a pretty well-known and decently large company, I'm now in that mid-level range, so I'm definitely shooting for that $100,000 and above in my next job.
And in terms of people who are kind of in this struggling job market, what's your biggest advice to them?
Yeah, so my biggest advice for people who are struggling in the job market is to make sure you have a optimized LinkedIn profile. You want a very nice profile picture, preferably you smiling. You don't have to smile, but smile. Make sure that make sure that your headline contains the job title that you're trying to obtain. So if you're trying to work as a software engineer, make sure that you have software engineer in that headline. Make sure that you have all of your relevant work experience, education, and personal projects also on your LinkedIn profile. And that would be my biggest tip. And I'm curious, what are some tips that you have for people who are struggling to land a job in the job market?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing is just like the mentality of knowing that this is a short-term thing. We've had layoffs, terrible markets when COVID first hit, and then in 2021 and 2022, things really got better. Similarly, years, decades before, this is how it works out. The market goes in cycles. So just knowing that it will correct, you will be fine. As long as you sort of consistently do the right things, it'll eventually work out. So that mentality switch is really important. I really like how you mentioned having a good, nice, neat LinkedIn, because LinkedIn's an excellent way to like apply to jobs. And I kind of similarly on that point is having not just a good resume, but a perfect resume. I know a lot of people, I do like a lot of resume reviews. A lot of people are like, man, does it really matter that much? Do I really need to focus that much on formatting and all that? And I'm like, okay, why don't you put a lot of effort in and make a perfect resume? So then when you apply, you know for a fact that you've done all that you can do. There's no way you can really improve it. So you gave your best foot forward and it didn't work out, rather than scratching your head, oh, what could I do? What could I do? You know? So those are like my biggest 2 tips.
That's some good 2 cents.
Yeah, appreciate that. And I guess on that point, so the resume point that I made, can we actually pull up your resume? Let's go through it. Thank you for sending it in. Let's see what we got here. All right, so first thing on your resume, what are some things that you do well?
Some things that I feel I do well on my resume is when it comes to the bullet points for my experience, I list the impact that I had for my role versus just listing out the standard stuff. Like instead of saying, oh, I worked in an agile team and participating in stand-ups and things like that, I have improved the speed of our POS application payment made Windows Edition by over 50%, allowing seamless navigation between various web pages. Having a impact that you made is much more better than just listing some generic job duty. And if you can attach a number to that, that makes it even better.
Yeah, I was just about to point out something that I really like about your resume is the fact that you have numbers on it. Like in your mobile game developer experience, the 3rd bullet point, 300% increase in downloads. And then the 2nd bullet point, 8K plus downloads. You know, I don't even have to like really read that much through your resume. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is pretty impressive. 300% increase. What could that possibly be? You know, and it just like drives eyeballs to your resume and, you know, just like makes you stand out in a crowded market.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And I guess on the flip side of that, what are some things that you could potentially improve upon on your resume?
Yeah, some things I think I could improve upon in my resume, especially after watching a lot of your resume videos, which are really good, by the way. If you're watching this, go check that out. But some things I feel I can improve on my resume is in my experience section, I have my job title, and then underneath that, I have the company that I work for. But since I work for a pretty well-known company as my most recent company, I feel I should switch that. So I should put software engineer below, put PNC at the top, and make PNC a little bit bigger to put emphasis on the company that I worked for instead of having it where the way it is now.
Yeah, that is so huge. I was actually just about to point out is that I know a lot of people when I do my resume reviews, I think one guy worked at like HBO Max, LinkedIn, Allstate or State Farm, one of those two, and like pretty big name companies, and they have it like underneath it, I think like italicized, just like tiny thing, but they have big, bold software engineer. And I'm like, what's more impressive? The fact that you worked at these big companies or the fact that you're a software engineer? It's the big companies, right? So make sure to like pop that out, right? That's the most important part.
Yeah, definitely. And do you have any personal tips about having a good resume? I'll be curious to hear them.
Yeah, for sure. So I know some people who try to have a lot of bullet points in a particular experience. I know I reviewed a resume where someone had like 7 or 8 bullet points in a 3-month internship. And I was like, man, you did more than me. And I've been working for like years now, you know? And I don't think that's the move because recruiters spend like so few like seconds reviewing a resume. And I think is really better. And what I encourage you all to do is to trim it down, try to speak concisely. And if you run into this situation where you have a lot of bullet points, take like instead of 7, have like max 3 or 4 bullet points, and then have an extra project or an extra experience that you can add on to your resume, and then have 3 more bullet points there. Because I think having multiple different types of experiences is much better than going super in depth in one internship that's only 3 months long at the end of the day. So that's a huge thing that I would share.
Yeah, definitely. And I like how you mentioned projects or having a variance of experience. Another thing I would recommend adding to your resume if you can is a personal project section. I believe personal projects are a good way to make you stand out from the competition. So if you can, make sure to include a personal project section on your resume. And, for those personal projects, list what you use to make them. And if you can, include a link to it so recruiters or the hiring manager can see the actual project live.
For sure. And on that point, what are some common mistakes you see people make on their resumes?
Yeah, so some common mistakes I see people make on their resumes is listing a lot of irrelevant information. I've seen people include their high school on their resume for some reason, and
I hate that.
Like your high school, it doesn't really matter. It's your degree, your certificates, things like that. That is what you want to be highlighting on your resume. But I see so much irrelevant stuff. And then sometimes when people have a personal project section on their resume, it's very bland. It's website or a mobile game that I made. Like, you should go a little bit more into detail about what tools and technologies that you use to make it. And those are some of the common mistakes that I've seen. But what are some of the common mistakes that you've seen on people's resumes?
Yeah, so other than what I already mentioned about like the big bullet points thing, the thing you mentioned about like the tools and technologies, you need to follow the used X to do Y that had Z impact. So you used like Python or Java to develop this project, or like say like a machine learning thing that had this impact on like 200 people, or had, in your case, 8K plus downloads, or had like a 90% accuracy. I think that's like the best format that not a lot of people follow, but I think that would really help you out there.
That's a good formula. I like that. I like that a lot, actually.
Stole it from Google, actually, so I can't take credit.
Hey, still a good formula.
I appreciate it. Anyway, so let's transition a little over. I want to get more into your background. I know that you mentioned in one of your videos how you spent 5 years in university and you had to like retake some of those classes that you were taking as part of your early on in your computer science degree. So could you actually talk us through like where you went to university and like kind of what happened there?
Yeah, so I graduated from Wright State University with my bachelor's in computer science of fall 2019, and I started college in 2014. I had no prior coding experience when I started majoring in computer science, and when I took computer science 1, or CS 1180 as it's known at Wright State, I failed the class. And, that hurt. The biggest reason on why I feel like I failed the class is I was afraid of asking for help out of fear of looking stupid. I saw other students getting it. I saw the TA explaining it and, teaching it just fine. And for some reason, I just couldn't grasp it. And instead of going to get the help that I needed, I didn't get help, and I ended up failing, and, that set me back. And another reason why I feel like I failed computer science 1 the first time I took it is because I didn't necessarily practice consistently. I was coming into it with the mindset that, I can get this project done in the last 3 days. I was given 3 weeks to do it. That was a terrible mindset to have. And I learned the hard way that if you're giving 3 weeks to do a project, you're giving that 3 weeks for a reason. That doesn't mean you can get it done in the last 3 days. Please
it's not
utilize
a 3-week vacation.
Please utilize the time that is given to you to complete those projects.
For sure. And so those are good, important things, like the procrastination part of it. I also want to emphasize another point, because you're like, things weren't clicking for you, right? Well, I always tell people that the learning curve for computer science is pretty steep, because not like biology or psychology where it's just like a bunch of like memorization. You actually have to change the way you think like as a programmer, in that like you're a problem solver. You're not just like an applier. So I think you can still end up having a successful career in that like you've worked at some pretty named companies, even though you spent a little extra time in college, and in the end of the day, it's not a race to break into tech, to break into the industry. It's to have like hopefully a successful lifelong career and life too, right? From that, were you facing like imposter syndrome throughout your computer science degree?
Definitely facing a lot of imposter syndrome throughout getting my computer science degree, because again, I saw other students advance just fine. I saw other students grasp the concepts that I was struggling with just fine. And that made me feel like I was stupid. That made me feel like I wasn't smart enough to do this. And, you know, thinking that just kind of made me not put in as much effort as I could have when I failed computer science 1 the first time I took it, or when I had to retake another class. And to kind of get over that, I kind of just put my pride to the side, accepted like, okay, I'm not understanding this. What can I do to get better at this? Because computer science or software engineering, you can kind of think of it like a sport. You need to practice your skills. You have to hone your skills consistently. If you don't work out your skills or work out a muscle, you know, it gets weak. It doesn't strengthen. So same thing with computer science. You need to practice consistently so you can get better at it. And instead of just like doing the typical, let me go watch a YouTube video, do some tutorials, I started trying to read through the code as if I was reading through a book. That really helped me out to try to just understand what was going on at a really high level.
That's valuable. That's good.
And I know that you graduated with your master's degree before I graduated with my bachelor's degree, which is really amazing, by the way. But did you ever feel like did you ever face any type of imposter syndrome, or what was your computer science experience like?
Yeah, I mean, appreciate that. And I guess in terms of like imposter syndrome, when I first entered like my freshman year at Georgia Tech, I encountered a lot of people who, or at least claimed to code since they were in middle school, or claimed to know like 15 programming languages. And I'm not joking when I say this, 15 as a freshman in college. And I was like, what am I doing? You know,
That's insane.
Very, very insane. But the thing is, I started like thinking of like, all right, so either I could feel this way and think that I'm not going to achieve anything or amount to anything, or I can actually do something about it. I can actually work as hard as I can, and then ultimately achieve success. And the important thing to note is that even though they may know more programming languages, that doesn't necessarily mean they're more successful. Like the person who gets the best internship doesn't end up being the most successful in life. Not all the time. I know people who are at the top universities who've been at top tech internships, but don't have a job right now. I also know people conversely who've been to community college who maybe weren't that successful in college, but now are working in the big tech company, actually one of the FANG companies in Silicon Valley. So just because you don't start particularly well doesn't mean you won't end up well. So I kind of had that mentality going in that like, all right, so I may not know as much, but I'm going to figure out what I'm going to know. And I guess if you're curious about what I figured out, just like watch all my like TikTok, Instagram, I just share all the things that I figured out. But that's kind of like my going at it.
Awesome. And I like how you mentioned the number of programming languages, because oftentimes I get asked, how many programming languages do I need to know? And I always say it's not about how many programming languages that you know. It's about knowing the relevant programming language for the job that you're going for. If you're trying to become like an Android software engineer, then make sure that you know Java or Kotlin. Knowing JavaScript, Python, PHP, and Swift are not necessarily good if you're trying to be an Android software engineer. Even though you know those 4 languages, and that's great that you do, that isn't relevant to getting a job as an Android software engineer if that's what you're trying to do in this example. So I like how you made that point, that it's not about how many programming languages that you know.
Yeah, for sure. And I personally, like, for people who are just kind of like beginners, I always say like maybe start out with Python or Java, and then if you want to do some like cool projects and all that, maybe pick up JavaScript. Python and Java I typically stick for like data structures and algorithms, interview stuff. JavaScript for more like projects because it has like the React framework, you know. That's kind of my suggestions. And actually, speaking of that, in terms of you rebounding from your previous like kind of spending a long time in college to ultimately ending up as a software engineer. I'm pretty sure you did like some coding projects along the way to help you land that job. Do you have any recommendations for our audience out here?
Yeah, so definitely. If you didn't know, I didn't do any internships in college, so I was very reliant on personal projects. And at the time, those were mobile games that I made. And then if you're making a project, I would say go beyond just making the basic project. And what do I mean by that? Let's say you make a portfolio website. If you make a portfolio website, put in the extra effort to actually have it hosted on your own custom domain instead of it just having it be the default free domain that they give you. If you make a mobile app or a mobile game, take the extra step to publish it to the Google Play or the Apple App Store. If you make a Chrome extension, take the extra step to publish it to the Google Chrome Web Store. And what this will do is it will put your app on one of these official stores. It will also make your projects look more professional. And in that case, it will make your project stand out more because it doesn't look like another run-of-the-mill cookie cutter. I watched a video tutorial project.
Yeah.
So that would definitely be my tips on doing personal projects. But what are your tips on personal projects?
Yeah, for sure. So like the ones that you mentioned, like the cookie cutter, YouTube tutorial ones, those are excellent for learning how to code, for getting started. Learning. They are not the ones that are going to get you into the big tech or the biggest, highest paying companies. Don't expect to copy a tutorial and then expect to get into big tech. That's not how it works. But in terms of potentially doing some impressive projects, so once you've done like your personal portfolios or like those kind of like medium-ish level projects, a step above that, maybe you pick up some machine learning data set that you get off of Kaggle, put it like through some algorithms and actually try to do some massaging of the data, changing it up a little bit and seeing if you can derive any insights from it. Actually, in college, during the pandemic, I did this one interesting project about predicting COVID-19 deaths. And I thought that was a pretty impactful project given the time that it was in. And it actually made for excellent talking points in interviews too. So that was a cool thing. If you don't want to do too much machine learning, picking up like AWS, you can learn through AWS Educate, a data pipeline project once again, and then putting it up on dashboards. And also like cloud computing is pretty hot right now. So like if you want to like pick up those skills, that would definitely help you out there. So those would be like my top 2 recommendations if you're really shooting for those like big tech companies.
Yep, awesome stuff.
Oh, appreciate it. Yeah. And I guess, something that is a little unique about you is you were a little in the game development side. I know we looked at your resume a little bit. Could you talk to us about like how you got into this field and what it's like?
Yeah, game development is actually the original reason on why I wanted to get into coding. When I was younger, I always said I wanted to make video games. When I got older, I researched how do you make video games. I saw you make video games through coding. Then I did a bit more research on what major teaches you how to code, and I came across computer science, and that's why I decided to major in computer science. And during my time getting my computer science degree, I started my game development journey with a class called game programming. That was my first ever time doing anything game development related, and really enjoyed that class. And to this date, that is still the highest grade I have got in the class. I almost got a perfect 100% in that class. And since then, I've been learning and making mobile games on my own independently outside of school and outside of work. And that led me to making and publishing multiple mobile games. And I put them on the Google Play Store. At the time, I was a heavy Android user. So my first games I made were Android exclusive. And then I got into the Apple ecosystem. And now I make games for both iOS and Android. In the game development space, I just love it. That is like a creative outlet for me and kind of the dream that I'm pushing for. Because I do one day want to be able to go full time with my indie game studio.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And I know that so I know you made like a couple of TikToks showing about like the actual games that you developed. And what skills do you need to know to be good at game development?
Yeah, so some skills you need to know to be good at game development, and a lot of people are not probably going to like this first thing, but you know how we have a lot of math in computer science, and we often say, you don't really need to use a lot of that math. Well, in game development, that kind of isn't the case. You will use a fair bit of math. Even when you use a game engine and a lot of the physics and stuff is abstracted for you, you still gotta do a fair bit of mathematical calculations, whether it be player movement, handling the speed or velocity of your player and things like that. So there's a lot of math involved with game development. And so you need to be fairly decent at math. Maybe not necessarily being like a mathematician, but you do at least need to know how to use math, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Outside of the math part, your typical coding skills, but something that is very underrated and something that I learned recently is game design. Game design and game development are not the same thing, as I have recently learned. So with my latest game, Into the Fragment, from a developer standpoint, I feel like the game was pretty good. The code was pretty neat. The performance of it was fairly decent. And it worked just fine. But from a game design aspect, it wasn't all too great. And if you're wondering what the difference is, you can think, in terms of typical software engineering, you can think, okay, we have the software engineering, that core part, but we also have UX, and game design is the UX of a game. So you need good game design skills, to help with the feel of your game. Maybe having sound effects when you jump, some screen shake when you collide into something, things like that. Another skill that you would need is art. Game art is a big skill that you need because you want your game to look good, and I don't have any art skills. So I normally try to outsource that to somebody who does have art skills, or I will try to do it on my own. But most of the time I outsource that because my art skills are not good.
I see. Yeah. I mean, I'm not artistic at all either, so I can relate very well there.
But that's kind of how game development differs from just your typical software engineering role. So again, it's more math heavy. You need good game design skills. And if you're doing it by yourself and you don't have the money or resources to outsource it, you're also going to need those art skills as well.
Yeah.
And I know game development isn't too common of an area for most computer science students to go into, but just out of curiosity, do you have any experience with any type of game development, game programming, or anything like that?
Yeah, so not particularly like professional game development experience, but I did take this one class in college that was really interesting. It was called Game AI. It was part of this intelligence concentration in my master's that I was doing, and we had to develop like these like heuristics for these enemy bots within a game to make it actually be able to like take down the hero, and then have the hero learn from it and have it take down. And then we would have to assess like under many different simulations, because there's like a level of randomness in the AI, like who would end up winning. And then we were actually like graded upon like how many times we would be able to have the hero ultimately beat the enemy in this environment. So it was like pretty cool. Like I've never been like graded based off of the performance of like a game that I like sort of developed into this AI. So that was really interesting. Yeah. But other than that, no like professional experience that I've done. But I mean, I do appreciate where you're coming from, and maybe I might do like a project here and there from it.
Oh, definitely. AI is like such a hot topic right now. And I think it's easy for us to forget that artificial intelligence has been around for decades at this point, and a lot of that started originally with games having an AI for enemy characters and things like that. So I'm really I think it's really cool that you mentioned that.
Yeah, and I guess I kind of want to transition a little over to, in terms of interviews, software engineering, getting a job. I know one big thing a lot of people say, data structures and algorithms. What else is important for us to know?
Yeah, so outside of data structure and algorithms, which is pretty important, you also want to make sure that your soft skills are also there. So in software engineering, interviews are typically broken up. You have your technical portion, and then you have what we call the behavioral round. And your behavioral round is kind of assessing who you are as a person to make sure that you are a good team fit. So make sure that your soft skills are there. Make sure that you're able to effectively communicate. Make sure that you're able to handle a situation where somebody may disagree with you on something. You know, how you respond to if a teammate wants to go one direction and you want to go another direction, or if somebody criticizes your code and says you should make changes, how do you handle things like that? So your soft skills are just as important as your technical skills. And I think a lot of people kind of just gloss over the fact there's this heavy focus on data structures and algorithms, which, is your leak code. And people tend to focus so much on that they don't practice anything about their soft skills, and then they ace the technical part, but they're wondering, why did I get a job offer? I aced the technical part, but come to find out, you didn't do good in the behavior round. And when it comes to getting a job as a software engineer, especially for those big tech companies, you need to do good in every single round of the interview.
That's good. That's good.
And what are some things you think people should focus on when it comes to interviewing as a software engineer outside of data structures and algorithms?
Yeah, so I think it's important to obviously know your soft skills. I think personally, I've afforded a lot of opportunities just because I have the capabilities of talking and talking pretty well in terms of like giving a good elevator pitch, talking during behavioral interviews, networking, reaching out to people via LinkedIn DMs. Like I have been able to just get so many more opportunities in that regard compared to people who may know way more than me in the technical space. But other than that, one thing that I love to point out is object-oriented programming. The 4 principles that has helped me out so much in interviews, because a lot of times they want to understand if you know how to design things well, if you know how generally good coding practices are, and it all starts down with the fundamentals. And I know a lot of people, they just focus on the leak code, focus on the data structures and algorithms, how things work, but they forget that on the job, that's not what you're doing. That's important for the interviews sometimes, but also object-oriented programming is a huge area. And I've actually been asked this so many times in interviews, which I'm kind of concerned why not a lot of people who talk about interview prep on social media, on the internet, they never mention object-oriented programming, but it's just so essential, fundamental to becoming a good programmer.
Definitely. I can't tell you the amount of times during an interview I have been asked to explain inheritance and polymorphism. I've been asked that a lot in interviews, and you'll be amazed by the amount of people who can't actually answer that question. Because again, they're so focused on the data structure and the algorithms, when they get hit with something that's not that, they kind of just freeze.
Yeah, for real. And okay, so that was really helpful. So let's switch over to the last question. I don't want to take too much of your time, but last thing, do you have any mistakes or regrets in your career thus far?
Yes, a couple of regrets that I have in my career is when I landed my first job, which was a week and a half after I graduated, I jumped on the first opportunity that came my way. I didn't search around at all anymore. I didn't try to test the waters anymore. And maybe you don't want to do that now in this market, but the market was different at the time. And I didn't test the waters at all. I didn't try to negotiate anything. I just jumped on the first opportunity that came my way. And that was probably due in part to me doing no internships. I was just trying to get any opportunity I could. It was probably due to me being a broke DoorDash and Uber Eats delivery driver, and I was finally looking for some stable income. But doing that actually led me to being underpaid in my first role. So I was getting paid $21 an hour, which equated to $43,000. And I live in a pretty low cost of living city. So $43,000 here in 2019, early 2020, that was still pretty decent money. However, I could have easily been making another $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 more if I just had been a little bit more patient and searched around some more.
That's very valid. I think a lot of people, sometimes they just get excited with the first big dollars that they get, especially seeing those 5 figures or 6 figures coming out. They're like, oh, but you're actually leaving some money on the table if you don't at least talk or see if there's any opportunities to meander around whatever value that they give you at first. So I think that's really good. And in terms of me, so I mean, I think in terms of my career, I graduated from college last May, so May 22. So I haven't been in the industry too long for me to actually really think of that many regrets. But in terms of like my college life, I would say that it does kind of suck that like I did graduate early, in that like I completed my bachelor's in 2 years, my master's in 1 year. So I completed my college within 3 years. And the thing is, there's nothing that beats like college experience or college networking, just meeting random people every single day. I will say that I do definitely miss that, but being an out-of-state student at Georgia Tech, paying $50,000 a year is not fun at all.
Yeah.
So it's a trade-off. So I can't say I 100% regret it, but I can't say like I'm 100% super happy either. So that's where I sit at.
Wow. And oh man, I'm trying to wrap my head around it. 3 years in college and graduated with your master's degree. That is crazy. How did you do that?
Yeah. So I guess I came into Georgia Tech by the time I finished high school with a lot of APs, dual enrollments, which amounted to 62 credits at Georgia Tech. And the thing is, I was pretty smart about like which courses I took. So I knew like certain APs counted. So like basically all those like 60 credits applied directly to my degree. It didn't go into like any like overflow category. And then because of that, a computer science degree at Georgia Tech is 120 something credits. And so I essentially had half of it done. So I only had half my credits left. And so I was able to complete that within 2 years. And then the upper level courses, like my electives later on in my bachelor's degree, I actually took at the master's level. So by the time I started my master's program, I had 40% of it already completed, which were 4 classes. So meaning I had 6 classes remaining to take across 2 semesters. Hence, I was able to finish that within 1 year. Hence the bachelor's and master's within 3 years.
That's crazy, but awesome.
Yeah.
Like, you don't see that. You don't see
you.
that every day. Somebody graduating with their master's in 3 years.
Yeah.
Oh man. But hey, I love to see it. I love to see it.
I mean, yeah, I really appreciate it. And I mean, I like just try to encourage anyone who's in a situation where they don't want to spend a lot of money in college. Like, there are ways around it. Obviously, I don't recommend everyone to force yourself to graduate early. Like, this is not like a recommendation, but I do like to share some of my story because I know people are in different financial situations. So maybe something that I share could help you save a couple tens of thousands of dollars out there, you know?
Yeah, I think a lot of people could benefit from saving a couple tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, for real. Yeah. All right. Well, really appreciate you joining on today's podcast. I think it was really valuable. I learned a lot personally, and I really hope that this was beneficial to our audience out there. For those of you who are interested in like learning more, check my page out on Instagram and TikTok for software engineering stuff, as well as Jay's page out on Instagram, TikTok. Do you got YouTube? Or just Instagram? Yeah.
No, not YouTube. Well, technically, but I just started the YouTube, so probably just Instagram.
All right, yeah.
TikTok, Twitter.
Yeah, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Follow Jay over there.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was really dope talking to you. Again, I'm really happy to be here. You know, it's really cool to actually sit and talk to people that you meet on social media. So again, thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. All right, take care. Bye.
See you.